Hello and welcome to Calibre Conversations, our online book festival where we chat to a range of authors in the hope of introducing you to books to add to your reading list. My name is Emma and I'm joined by Calibre supporter and volunteer Mark, and we're delighted to be speaking to the incredibly talented Matt Cain, who's a writer, broadcaster and a leading commentator on LGBTQ plus issues. He's also an ambassador for Manchester Pride, a patron of LGBT plus History Month, and in the New Year's Honours List in 2025, Matt was awarded an MBE for services to LGBTQ plus culture. So first of all, a hello and a big welcome to you, Matt.
Hi, thank you for having me, Emma, and Mark too. It's great to be here.
I'm not sure I think you might be our first MBE author on here. I'm not sure we've had one before, so that's a huge honour.
Funnily enough, the MBE, the medal, is in the downstairs loo, and I forgot I was going to bring it up to show it to you, but
Oh,
everybody loves seeing it. And yeah, that was an amazing moment. That was the beginning of last year, 2025.
that is huge congratulations on you. That, and actually that our first question kind of charts your journey towards receiving that honour, because you've had a really varied and a hugely successful career. You've been a maker and then a presenter of arts programmes for television. You've been an award-winning, or are still an award-winning freelance journalist and editor, and now you're an acclaimed author as well. Can you just talk us a little bit through how your career develops, and do you have a favourite role out of all the jobs that you do?
The favourite role is writing novels. That's easy. So I can tell you that straight away. In terms of my career, I mean, it's interesting. People look back on it now and they say, oh, I was the editor of Attitude magazine. I was the arts editor on Channel 4 News. They think it sounds impressive, but part of the reason it's varied, as you say, is I didn't know what I was doing. There's a saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I grew up in the working class north, in a town called Bolton. I went to school in Bury. And my mum and dad were from council estates. We didn't know anybody who worked in a creative industry. Certainly not anybody who made a living from words. And I just had no idea that it was always in me, but I didn't know how to do it, how to express or explore that urge to write and create. So it was only when I got to university that I started to do student drama and do more creative things. And afterwards, lots of friends were getting jobs in TV and things. And I wrote, in those days, you had to write actual printed letters and sign them. I wrote 211 letters of application, got one reply. And it was from a TV company in Manchester, a really rubbish satellite and cable one. And they were the only people who give me a job. So I just started working there. And each step, so I started making documentaries. Then I ended up making arts documentaries. There was a series called The South Bank Show for a long time, Profiles of Artists. It was only then that I started to meet writers. And then after that, I got the job as arts correspondent on Channel 4 News, purely because of the knowledge that I'd accrued in 8 years at the South Bank Show. And it was only then that I thought, oh, well, maybe I should do kind of gay journalism. And I got the job but it was kind of feeling my way through and having to work it out as I went along. Because, at my school, I remember doing a careers interview. They told me I should be a chiropodist. I've no idea how they got to that. But yeah, I mean, I look back now and I'm proud of some of the jobs that I've done, and I'm proud of the journey and getting where I wanted to be in the end. But a lot of it was, certainly in the early days, staggering around in the blind trying to work it out.
Would you say, Matt, that in obviously we're in National Year of Reading this year, and one of the aims is for trying to get people to read for pleasure again, because that's sort of at an all-time low. Would you say that reading has played any part in sort of shaping your career, or had a role to play in that at all?
Yes. When I was a kid, I did love reading. I can still remember my mum reading to us, the three of us, me, my brother, and sister, and it had a massive impact on my life. From the picture books that she read when we were little to, I remember one school holiday, she read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to us. And I've still got that book on my shelves over there. I kept the one that she actually read to us. And but the reading actually, I did come from a family of my mum was a reader, and it was my dad was a teacher. It was very much a family that valued education and the power of the printed word. But my love of reading came within a love of culture in general. So I was obsessed with films, pop music, the whole lot, TV. It wasn't like I only read. I kind of had various different channels of escape and expressing my creativity, and reading was one of them. But yeah, it was. I tell you what, actually, Emma, in a weird way, I used to look at things like pop stars and people on telly. Um, I could watch telly and see something like Coronation Street that everybody watched in the Northwest when I was growing up. There were people like me. Pop stars were people like me. Writers weren't. And of all the industries, bearing in mind I did work at the South Bank Show, which was a cross arts documentary series, and then I was the arts correspondent at Channel 4 News across all the arts. There is absolutely no question that even to this day, publishing is the creative industry that is still the most snobbish. Everybody went to private school. They were all posh girls whose husbands work in finance. The norm is that you write for a hobby. They don't understand that you might need paying on time to pay your mortgage. It's kind of, I remember I had a delay with the payment, and I said that to somebody in finance. I said, I can't pay my mortgage. And she was like, oh. It never occurred to her. So bear in mind, when I was growing up, I would see people like me on telly in these other creative industries, even at the cinema. I'd see them a lot more than I would. It was only posh people who wrote books. It was only posh people who worked in publishing. And it's still very much like that now. But in my day, when I was growing up, there was a real disconnect,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my engagement with writing and reading as a child, and that's partly why I'm so passionate about broadening it out. Why all my characters are working class, gay, from the north, because I just didn't see myself when I was growing up, and it's been such a battle to get published and to have success in the first place that I don't want to give that up.
No, that's really important as well, because your books are just that, they have such a range of characters, and it's really relatable as well. You fall in love with them completely. Thank you.
Chronologically, your first book published was Shot Through the Heart, which came out in 2014. But I think the first one you wrote was The Madonna of Bolton. Great title, by the way. Which was written several years earlier, but not published until 2018. What's the story behind the story?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'll tell you one thing, Mark. It wasn't first. At first, it wasn't called The Madonna of Bolton. It was called Madonna and Me.
Oh, right. I think I prefer The Madonna of Bolton.
Well, I'm very happy with that title. But what happened was, it was so that book. It's about a boy in the work. That's the most. They always say your first one is the most autobiographical. It's about a boy in the working class north. Having a hard time at school because he's gay, clinging on to pop idol Madonna as a kind of spirit guide to get him through. And then later in life, he has to let go of that obsession in order to find his own voice as a writer. And actually, part of the book is his journey to finding his own voice and working out that that's what he's meant to be. Because like me, he didn't know. So the story is, I wrote that first around my full-time jobs. Nobody would publish it for 10 years. Rejection after rejection after rejection from a load of agents. So then I'd get an agent and would get it from a load of publishers. And then the agent would drop me. And then I'd get another one. And then it would get a lot more rejections from publishers. I stopped counting when I got to 34 from publishers. God knows how many I had from agents. But over that time, two things. Over that time, I tried to be, to put emotions to one side and think, is there anything about the feedback that I could actually improve? And one thing that happened was the relationship with his hometown, the character's hometown, came to the fore more. Hence the change of title. Also, a writer called Damien Barr wrote a book called Maggie and Me in the meantime. And the books are nothing like each other, actually, but purely because he's also a working class gay and there's so few of us in the industry, people thought it was too close. So I changed it, but I was happy with that, actually, because the relationship with the hometown turned out to really resonate with a lot of people. But anyway, when everybody was rejecting this book, I was carrying on writing, and one publisher who'd wanted to buy it said to me, I couldn't get it past the sales and marketing teams in the editorial meeting, because you don't just have to get an editor who believes in you. They have to convince everybody else it's a marketable proposition. And he said to me, I can't get this book off the ground, but I'm just picking at a hair on my keyboard. But he said to me, why don't you, they think it's too niche, why don't you write books without a gay central character, but with a central straight female character who has gay best friends? And I thought, first of all, I object to this, but let me see if I can find a way of doing it. And without kind of, letting go of my integrity. So Shot Through the Heart is about, the title will make sense in a minute, a Hollywood actress who's the queen of the rom-com who falls in love with a paparazzi photographer. It's kind of an enemies to lovers rom-com. But he gets increasingly jealous of her relationship with her male co-star, who he doesn't realise is a closeted gay man. And obviously everything comes to a head, as these things do, as they are hurtling towards the opening night of their new film. So actually, I found a way of doing this one and another book that I wrote in that vein, which didn't involve compromising my integrity. But they didn't sell. So I was dropped. And that's when I had to pick myself up, got myself a job as, don't know how I taught myself into this because I'd never worked in print journalism before, but I got myself a job as editor-in-chief of Attitude magazine, which is the big gay magazine. And while I was there, this is a very long answer, Mark, I'm sorry that I'm taking forever. While I was there, I realised that Attitude, I'd been a columnist for Attitude in the past, and so I'd been involved with the magazine, and I knew that they'd struggled to get big stars to go on the cover because there weren't that many gays. So you'd have an actor who was playing a gay role in a sitcom or a soap opera, that kind of thing, or a footballer who'd say, I want to be a gay icon, lots of my friends are gay, whatever, I'm gay friendly, I'm an ally. And I realised that when I became editor, that actually we had loads of gays to go on the cover by that stage because there were gay pop stars, there were gay films, there were gay TV shows. It was all happening. In the same way as I tell you that that's how I felt with working class characters and artists when I was a kid. I would see them in other areas. I didn't see them in publishing. Same thing was happening now, 2016, 2017, when I was at Attitude. And there were gay artists everywhere. There just weren't any gay writers in publishing. You'd have kind of literary writers like Alan Hollinghurst from the 80s who was still going. There wasn't anybody that people I knew might want to read. So I thought, right, I'm going to do something about this. And there was a crowdfunding publisher called Unbound. And I went in and I said, I want to crowdfund my book through you guys, but I don't just want to crowdfund it. I want to create a huge stink. I want to share all my homophobic rejection letters, and I want to abuse my magazine's social media channels, get a load of celebs involved that I've met through my work at the magazine, and kick up a storm and get it public, get it crowdfunded in record time. And it did. We did it in about 7 days. We had amazing celebs from Gok Wan to David Williams to Arlene Phillips supporting it, and amazing authors like David Nichols and Lisa Jewell both pledged, and so then that, which had been the first book that I'd written, became the third book to be published, crowdfunded through Unbound. So that is a very long story. I'm sorry it took ages, Mark, but it kind of all
it's
is
a fascinating tale.
To what you wanted to know.
You've got so you've just given us sort of basically a lot of the difficulties you had in and have had in getting books published, particularly the Madonna of Bolton. It just seems like an endless string of rejections in all that you've been saying. So what made you or drove you want to carry on writing? And actually, if you could go back in time and sort of give yourself a bit of advice, what would it be, do you think?
I don't think if I knew how horrendous it would be and how hard it would be for me to take, I don't think I could have put myself through it, even knowing that I'd come out the other end. Because the thing is, Emma, I grew up with everybody I went to state schools, everybody in the school playground. You can imagine how I went down in the 80s, sounding like I do. Just everybody homophobically bullying me. So what then happens is, I was on Channel 4 News where people on social media were just saying horrendous homophobic comments. And then I'm sending out my novel to editors and they're saying, really sorry, we just don't think the public would be interested in a gay story. It was all triggering, to use a young people's word. And I don't know whether I could have put myself through it. I think possibly now that I have found out, I found out last year, 2024, that I'm autistic and ADHD, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview, because I think the work you do with neurodivergent people is brilliant. But I've got that thing that several people have when they're diagnosed later in life, when they start looking back and making sense of things. And, with autism, you can be very tenacious, very fixed, rigid thinking. And I thought I was sticking with Madonna of Bolton and fighting and fighting and fighting for it because I passionately believed in this idea, which I did. But I think also there's possibly an element of being autistic and not giving up, to be honest. And also having that high kind of justice sensitivity that people with autism and ADHD have. Felt like it was a real injustice. If they were rejecting it and saying they thought it was crap, maybe I wouldn't have been so passionate about it. But they were, in the early days, one or two of them did say they didn't think it was good enough. But what kept coming up over and over again is they didn't think a gay-themed book would sell. And a character who was gay, they thought that was a problem. And I think I just got the bit between my teeth, and that's where one of my autistic traits came to the fore. And thank God it did, because that book would never have been published if it weren't for that.
I was going to say, just looking at that, given the difficulties you got of getting it into print, the crowdfunding, the fact you did it in record time, I think you got support from 36 countries, and you mentioned some of the people who came to your support. When you did actually get it published, how did you feel after all that struggle?
Oh, that's a good question. Shall I tell you what, Mark? By that stage, having worked at ITV and Attitude and Channel 4, I'd met lots of celebs. I was very grateful that they all supported it. But the thing I found the most moving was people from every stage of my life pledged. And actually, if I ever have a down day, I will look at that book, which is there on my bookshelves, all the ones I've written behind me, and I will look at everybody who pledged. There's people from primary school, secondary school, university, all my jobs, right through, family, friends, aunties, uncles. And just when I was coming to the end, when I was, there was a website, and I could look and see how I was getting close to the target. And when I was about a tenner off the target, I phoned my dad up at home because I thought my dad's really going to be want to be the one to push me over. Because we had a journey. He was a northern working class man's man, very into football, all that. Partly like the character in his relationship with his son, the father character in the book. But I phoned my dad up and told him, and he was looking after two of the grandkids at the time, and he dropped everything and went and pledged for one final book to push his son over the finish line. It was that kind of thing that I found more moving than anything else, And also, it was quite humiliating when I was doing this big job as editor of Attitude to say, nobody wants to publish my book, and there were some people on social media saying, maybe it's crap, and yeah, I do remember feeling kind of intense relief and, oh my God, I can't believe I've done that. And actually, if anybody asked me now, what's your proudest achievement? I'd say not just writing that book, but fighting and fighting to get it published, actually, because it was literally just on the scrap heap. And everybody, agents told me, oh, just forget about it, move on. And I didn't.
And all of those people believed in you as well to, pledge their support, and that was the main thing as well, wasn't it? So, and it's testament that it's here. Now, your stories are all full of, heart and hope, and they've got amazingly vivid and relatable characters. So how much of your writing is shaped and influenced on your experiences of being gay and growing up in 1980s Bolton, as you've already kind of alluded to as well? And do you have any thoughts or advice for aspiring writers who face challenges of whatever nature in getting their work into print?
I think growing up and being made to feel that there was something wrong with me and being made to feel ashamed of it and not quite accepting who I was and moving gradually from that place of shame to self-love is the defining journey of my life, and it has informed all my writing. And funny enough, I've done some teaching. I've taught an Arvon course, and I think I'm doing another one this year. And so this leads me on to the second part of your question. What's your best tip? I would say work out what you can do better than any other writer, or what kind of emotion or journey you can really nail. And with me, I know I'm not the best writer, but I know that one thing I can really do well is that journey from shame to self-love. People in lots of characters in lots of different situations. So actually having the kicking that I did from school right through my life was the making of me, which is also good to remember. But yes, I think that's how it shaped and influenced me. And that's my advice, sorry, to writers. As well as, don't let anybody grind you down, never give up. What my mantra when I go for a walk on a Sunday morning on my own, which is my self-treat, and it keeps me sane along the river in London usually. And I say, don't take anything personally, keep your blinkers up and keep your eye on the prize. That's my mantra that I repeat to myself on those walks. And that's what I would also say to aspiring writers.
Well, you've not just given writing tips there, you've given mindfulness tips about going out for a walk. That's really important too. That was two for the price of one. So you just mentioned there actually that your books are all so very different. They're set in very different worlds with very different characters and backgrounds. And this actually leads us really nicely into a question that came via Chris, who's one of your followers on Instagram. So we're going to give a shout out to Chris. And he asked, you aren't a postman, so how did you arrive at Albert as a character? Which is in reference to your fantastic book, The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle. So where does your inspiration come from for your characters and your plots, and particularly Albert?
So I don't usually tell people this, but I'll tell you guys the truth. I had done the Madonna of Bolton. It had been a hit. And I thought, right, so publishers wanted to talk to me. And I thought, right, I'm going to try and create a mega hit now. And there'd been all those books. Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. All those characters struggling, stuck in a rut, struggling to break away from a past trauma and somehow getting out of this and finding the way to happiness. And I thought, I can do that with a gay man. I thought you don't have to go back far to the time when it was illegal. And, you know, whatever struggles I had would have been infinitely worse. And actually, if I make him older and bring him to the present day, then I can contrast that awful treatment from the past with the widespread acceptance now, and hopefully kind of celebrate how far we've come, and all those readers who were allies, who've stuck up for their gay brothers or gay neighbours or gay colleagues, who've all played a part in it. They can all kind of feel invested in this story. And I'd loved Brokeback Mountain, which is about two men who have an amazing summer together and then kind of cast off in different directions. And without giving too much away, we know it has a tragic ending. I thought I want to do a book that like that, but that has the possibility of a happy ending. I'm not going to say whether or not it has one if anybody hasn't read it. And guess what? We were speaking to a lot of publishers, and one of them was like, oh, I love this story. But she said, it's too gay. Can't we just find out that he's gay at the end? And I said, well, the whole point is he's looking for this love of his life. How do I do that? And I've kept her emails. Please keep any LGBT themes in the background. Just reveal he's gay at the end. And obviously I refused. So I didn't publish it with that publisher. We went out on general submission. But that editor said to me, she'd read an article in which Royal Mail employees were being encouraged in some government initiative to combat the epidemic of loneliness by checking in on their people they were delivering, not customers, people they were delivering letters to. And if you know somebody's an old lady and you've not seen her for a bit, maybe knock on the door and say hello, that kind of thing. She wanted this to be the centre of my book, and not to bring up that he was gay until the last chapter as a kind of reveal. And I like to think when I'm outraged by this kind of suggestion, I can still hone in on some, you know, I thought, right, if he's cut off from his community, but actually if he's a postman, he'll still be on a kind of veneer of a superficial level, still have contact with everybody. He will be at the heart of the community. People will know him. I thought I can work with this. So it was her idea to make him a postman.
So you had the last laugh.
I nicked her best idea. And one of my cousins works in the post office in Warrington. So I sent her the book and as a manuscript, and she checked that everything was correct, my post office details.
Oh, brilliant.
Now, you mentioned early on that you were diagnosed with autism and ADHD, but that was when you were age 49, and you wrote about it in a very powerful piece in The Guardian last June about the impact of that diagnosis. Because for 49 years, you've been thinking that it was being gay that has shaped people's attitudes towards you, and now you found there were extra factors influencing that. How has that diagnosis shaped your life since it was made, and what influence will it have on your writing?
I'm still working it out, I think. There's certain things I can do now to make life easier for myself. So I wouldn't push myself too far out of my comfort zone now if I realised that was actually just going to be difficult for me. Things that I get wrong or mistakes I make that I can now see were actually expressions of my neurotype. I can go easier on myself. Things like stimming, you know, repeated movements or habits that can be calming. So when I was a kid, I used to have, I've not got anything here, but I used to twiddle my blanket. I used to have a security blanket and I used to twiddle it. And that's stimming. I didn't realise that. But also like getting just a just taking like one word, one sentence from a random conversation, skip around singing it, musicalizing it. Lots of these things that I would do. I do them now. You know, I stopped myself doing them because people would say they're a bit weird. And I stopped myself. I don't stop myself anymore. I do them. I've got some earplugs. I won't say the brand name, but you can look them up online. My sister got me some earplugs that I can wear on the tube, so all the noise I don't find overwhelming. There's lots of little things like that. And knowing to give myself breaks, not overload myself with certain things. But it's going easier on yourself, not putting too many demands on yourself. And actually, I can see that it has really helped with my writing. Things like feeling emotions intensely may be difficult in life. They're great when you're on your own at your laptop, working through several drafts of a character and his emotional journey. You know, being hyper empathetic and hypersensitive, that's great. I'm a real planner. Autistic people are often big planners. They don't like spontaneity. And that's great when you've got multiple time frames and plots and different points of view to kind of plan all that. Also, just that thing, people with ADHD and autism both have obsessions, in inverted commas, or special interests, passions. I do. And I actually think that really helps with my writing because I immerse myself in a project and become obsessed with it for a year or so, and then I'll move on to something else. And that works for my brain actually. So and that what I was telling you earlier about growing up gay and being made to feel there was something wrong with me and being made to feel ashamed of myself and working towards a place of pride. Actually, without even knowing it, a lot of the things people made fun of me about, my quirks and eccentricities, were actually about being autistic. And I was ashamed of them. And I've had a parallel journey. And that's fed into I think I did an extra layer of depth to my characters.
I know last year you were one of the authors selected by the reading agency to create a story for the Quick Reads collection, which are short, accessible, affordable books released every year. The result was Game On, set in the world of football, interesting given your interesting views about football, and featuring journalist Cosmo and footballer Tom. How did you find the experience of writing for this collection, and did you find any aspect of it daunting or particularly challenging?
I loved it, and I'm really passionate about the reading agency's work, broadening access to reading, and quick reads are for people who find it difficult, they're intimidated or find it difficult to read a full-length book, and they have simple language. Maybe people who struggle with dyslexia at school or English isn't their first language. I thought I'm going to do it, and I thought I will do a gay story. It's an enemies to lovers rom-com. Tom is a closeted gay footballer in the Premier League. And Cosmo is this kind of woke, queer activist journalist who's sent to interview the football club. The club is in Toddington, the working class town in the northwest where Albert Entwistle lives. So it's kind of a companion piece. Anybody who's read that book will recognise certain locations and characters popping up again. I was delighted to be asked. The thing I was daunted about actually was being able to write a book in 20,000 words because my usual length is about 110,000. But I just had to be really disciplined and plan it. And the football thing, I thought if I'm doing enemies to lovers, I want, what's the last front line, the last bastion of homophobia in this country? And I thought, Premier League football. And when I was growing up, it always felt like the worst blasts of homophobia I got were on the football pitch in PE with all the footy lads having a go. You know, he kicks like a girl, he can't, you know, all that kind of stuff. Frightened of the ball. I thought, right, I'll tackle it head on because I've got 5 nephews and they're all obsessed with football. And they all love playing football. So I'd had to do all that anyway. I mean, the oldest one's 28 now. The youngest one is 13, about to turn 14, of the boys. So I'd played football with them a lot, and actually, half of them, their dad is from Wolverhampton, so they're Wolverhampton Wanderers supporters. The other half, their dad is from Bolton, so they support Bolton Wanderers, which is my home team, my dad's team. So I thought, I'd been with them a few times. I thought I'll get in touch with the club and see if they'll let me go backstage, as I called it, not the right word for football. And I got in touch with them. They were really nice. They let me go and poke around. I sat down with their head of media, asked him a lot of questions about the structure of a day and how training worked and all that. He let me have a look around the dressing room and the physio area. It was great. So, it was I suppose you could say it was like a healing process for me, writing that book. And I really enjoyed it. And I also wrote it partly because none of the boys in my family, I've got 5 nephews, 2 nieces, but the youngest niece is only 2. None of them are readers. And I've tried and tried and tried. They all loved me reading to them when they were little. But as the boys have got older, they've all given up reading. And I just don't understand it. I've tried and tried and tried. I've dedicated a book to one of them. And I thought, if I write about football and it's an easy book to read, they'll have to read it. And none of them has.
Maybe you should try them on the audio version, Matt. Give them the audio version. That might be a better way into it.
That's a good idea, actually. That is a good idea. There is an audio version of Game On. Yeah, that's a good idea. I will.
It can be a good little gateway just into reading. So that might spark their reading fire for that. Now I want to give some platform time to your most recent book, One Love, which I'm just right at the end of, so don't do any spoilers. So this features Danny and Guy and spans their friendship from the early 2000s up to 2022. As I sort of was loving it because this covered the 2000s when I was like their age, and it was just brilliant for me. So I was reliving all my sort of party days and everything, which was brilliant. But can you tell our listeners a little bit about this story and where it's set?
Manchester is the city that saved my life as a gay teen growing up in Bolton. There's chapters in Manchester in all of my books. It's only 22 minutes on the train from Bolton, but it might as well have been a different world before the internet. And it did absolutely save my life. And I love it. And I've been a patron of Manchester Pride. And I thought... I loved David Nicholls' book One Day, that kind of blurred boundaries between romantic sexual attraction and friendship. And I wanted to write about that because I thought it's actually way more intense amongst gay men. You know, it's quite unusual to meet a straight man and a straight woman in the post-university who are very close friends. And, you know, especially once you start to get married and that kind of thing, it doesn't really happen. I thought, but whereas with gays, you're the right gender for, you know, the default for not just romantic sexual partner, but the default for best friend. And it does happen often. And I thought if I write about this theme, which has resonance for lots of people, and I do it through the lens of 2 gay men, I can kind of give it added intensity. And I thought loads of straight people I know love going to Pride. It's quite a good way in. So if I set it over Pride weekend, then it might have a mainstream resonance, because I'm still asked that all the time, every time I'm writing a new book. Still battered over the head with the niche, that awful word, by publishers. So I wrote about 2 gay men who meet at Manchester University in 2002. They become best friends.